Yeah. If you want, you can have a chair, just put them over there.
I mean, you could
Oh,
get it.
that's right, you sit over there, you're behind it. Yeah.
The hardest part, really, I mean, who knows how, unless it's changed. The hardest part is when it's cloudy, it's windy.
Maybe comfy.
Then for 2 days, the first 2 days.
Committee for the town of Greenwood. And as in the past, we follow a protocol. All the members are here tonight, which is the first time in a couple of meetings. Welcome, everybody. We'll have 10 minutes of comments from the public and also 10 minutes from the committee members. And if the public would like to raise their hands as to who would like to comment, we'll divide by that number of hands. We have 1, 2, 5 each. You're up, sir.
Already, huh?
You got it.
I don't know if anybody's taken a peek at the pictures, but those eagles frequent the fields. There seemed to be a little bit of discrepancy from Calpine about whether we have them or not. We have them. That's right out my kitchen window. That's the view I'm gonna have. That is my kitchen window. That's pulling in my driveway. For me, there'll be zero escape. Zero escape. Not even close. That's what I'm gonna come home to 24/7. I don't like it. This one down here is what the people on that side of the pond or anybody out on the pond are gonna see. That isn't so much my problem. Mine's a little closer, but that's what they're gonna get. It isn't any good. I don't know if anybody can look at that and find the good in it, but I certainly don't. Beautiful blue sky, I guess. The water looks great. The wind towers don't need to happen. I really don't understand why we're having this problem. We shouldn't be having this problem. I think we've got enough problems without this problem. What this is going to do is going to depress the town. A lot of people are going to move, definitely. A lot of part-time camps, they're going to be rented or sold. My place will probably be sold or rented, whatever. We're going to fill the town with a whole different dynamic of people. And it's not going to change from that. We're going to look a lot like Rumford or Berlin. That's what will happen. Right now, it's a pretty good neighborhood. Real good neighborhood. You can leave the keys in the vehicle. Doesn't go anywhere. That's going to be a thing of the past. When the good people of the town move out and the influx happens. I know that's what's going to happen. I've talked to people. They're not going to stay if this happens. That's it.
Thank you, Steve. You're up, sir.
Totally agree with you. I have a statement I'd like to read regarding the property value guarantee, which is going to be discussed later on in the meeting. I'm not sure what the committee's going to decide later in the agenda regarding the PVG clause in the ordinance, but I certainly would like to see it added. I've talked about it several times. Town council, I read his email. He does not seem to be as receptive in his statement as I am. But as I read his statement, he's basically saying that if the will of the townspeople allow a development, all must accept the impact on surrounding properties. And that makes sense. If you look at most communities, that's the way it is. The difference is that Greenwood is different than most communities. And the reason it's different is that 700 of the 95 properties in this town are property owners that have no voting rights because they're non-residents. And they're the ones that are going to be directly impacted by this project. And I stated in the past that if we could vote as a group, that 700, it wouldn't even be an issue because a wind farm development would never happen based on people that have been coming to these meetings and other people I've talked to. It just wouldn't happen. But we can't, so we're subject to the will of the voting residents without a viable recourse against the developer. And that's totally different than all the townspeople coming together and voting a zoning change. Majority rules, everybody that's affected by it, that's the way it is. But the fact that we have voters and non-voters, and the big chunk of the voters, a big chunk of the people are non-voters, and they're the ones that are directly affected, that makes it a totally different situation. And town council does not, I don't think he considered that in the email that he sent out. Maybe he thought about it, but he didn't mention anything about that, and I think that's a serious, serious difference between a normal city and town and the way Greenwood is. So without the PVG, the residents' only recourse is gonna be a lawsuit against the wind farm, which will be long, it'll be expensive, and ultimately, the homeowners are probably just gonna walk away. They're not gonna be able to pursue it long enough because they're not gonna have enough money to do it. PVG, however, that creates a fair alternative option, and it only applies if in fact property values do decline. If they don't decline, then the PVG clause is in there and it's a moot point. I've said that in the past too. So I don't know which way the committee is gonna move on this issue. It's definitely a difficult decision, because there's pros and cons. I've gone both ways on this all the way through this entire process. For the last year, I brought this up back almost last summer. So if you do decide to pursue it, the Montville ordinance that was submitted to you guys for review, I looked at that a long time ago, and I think it's a much better ordinance than the proposed legislation that I submitted at the last meeting. I think it's simpler, it's definitely comprehensive, and there's even a health clause in it that's not in the proposed legislation. So if you do move forward, I would hope you would consider the Montville PVG, and I hope that you do in fact go forward with the PVG. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, committee, oh, sorry,
I'll put my 2 cents in.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. I think that's a very, very good point. I think the other part is what's meaningful to the town in of itself. And when it comes to the town, how do these affect the town? So in terms of financial gain is the big comment. We're gonna have less taxes, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Is that in fact a reality or is it not a reality? I think the consensus would be when you really study it, it may not be a reality because of diminishment in recreation and people that provide work, jobs for people, redoing cottages, redoing houses, maintenance, all those things that go through with the recreation that this area provides, amongst other things. And I think that's the point that needs to be brought across, as well as not only the property values. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Committee members, 10 minutes. Anybody want to make any comments?
I would make a comment. I understand that this is like a very, it's a very crucial thing to people who live in the community. However, if we try to put something in wording into the ordinance, we can like create something that would be just very, very muddy, and make people be very they wouldn't understand anything, and they therefore might not might not vote for what we're trying to propose. So I would propose that we make something that has to do with property values be a part of the permitting process. I mean, if someone wants to, like, you know, propose that they want to do, you know, wind towers or something like that, then part of that process would be, well, okay, you're gonna do that, and if that's what you wanna do, then you need to like make sure that we know in the beginning what the value of those properties are before any properties go in there. And therefore, you would set that up as part of the permitting process and how you would deal with that there. And I'm not sure exactly how you do that, but I don't think we want to try to put it into the ordinance, because I think we could just get into very, very sticky waters, and it would be really hard for people to understand what it is, and it would be hard to qualify. And I'll just put that out there for anybody else to comment on. Tyler, anybody else? And even like, John, Melanie,
Anyone else have any comments?
Well, I mean, I have some thoughts. So it'd be like a real estate assessment before the project went in, with like a map that would show properties that would be affected within a certain mileage, and then part of their permitting process would contain the language that those, affected properties would have to agree to have a compensation plan, and that would be part of the permitting process. That's what you're proposing, just for clarity, something like that.
Yeah, that's
And
what
then-
I'm.
Can we do that?
As I've said in the past, you can do anything.
We can require it.
Again, I don't know enough about this. I've read a lot of the information that's been sent out. I read the thing from the attorney. This information is less scientific than the noise stuff. We have engineers and noise, and what the attorney basically said, well, what I got out of it anyways, you don't require this on other projects, and I'm not supporting wind here, people. I'm just trying to show what it is. And there's so many variables that could go in to change the value of property. From someone that has noisy motorcycles next to you all of a sudden, to someone that has something else, to someone that has wind and it's done. So I think you've got to put a lot of thought into how you do that, and how, what the results will be from that.
I would just say that, what we're talking about now doesn't have to do anything about like someone's Peterbilt or a motorcycle or anything like that. We're talking about something specific to properties that are going to be next to a place that has, again, this is specific to a wind farm. And what you would ask is you would say that, well, in your permitting processing for a wind process, for a wind farm, not for like if someone's going to have their Peterbilt parked in their driveway or something like that. We're not trying to get down to specifics like that. We're just trying to look at one specific thing that might happen to affect a lot of other people, who are in there. And so if you make it specific to that and specific to that particular process where somebody wants to say, hey, we want to have a wind farm, and you say, okay, well, let's look at the value of the properties within a certain parameter, and if those change, then you have to make people look at that, and that's all I'm proposing, is that we don't put wording into the wind ordinance. We just say that it comes up differently in the permitting process.
Who's in charge of the permitting stipulations?
It's the planning board.
It's in our ordinance. We actually say what the parameters are. We've already said that with respect to just talking to John earlier tonight about ambient sound. if someone wants to apply for a commercial wind facility, they have to develop, as a part of the permit application, ambient sound, for infrasound and for audible sound. And to your points about making an ordinance a little bit confusing, it's very easy to do with respect to the subject of real estate. And also health, by the way. It's a legal nightmare. And I don't think the ordinance should be the place for it, but what we could do as a committee is make a recommendation to change the ordinance to include wording that basically says we want a baseline for property value for real estate that's abutting the commercial wind facility.
Within a certain parameter.
Exactly. And we could, discuss that. And then all of the intricacies of what that might be should be between the applicant, the commercial wind company, and the landowners. Now, if you want to get into the legal business of it, you've got so many things to consider with respect to agreeing on real estate value, the current market conditions, you've got improvements, you've got updated baseline, sale of the property. All these factors come into and that has to be agreed upon between the landowner and the commercial wind facility. So it doesn't get into an ordinance dictating what those things are, because I have to tell you, not only would it be confusing to the voters, it would be confusing to the planning board and confusing to everybody.
But it would
You just
change,
couldn't.
and it would change,
You would have a lot of stuff, but if you just push it off to an agreement between the parties, now that legal nightmare is on them. They have to decide, this is my value of the property, this is what an appraisal said my value of the property is. And the wind company says, okay, or not. And they'll go back and forth. But I mean, that's something for them to deal with. And how many properties are there that would be affected? That depends on where they're going to put whatever they're going to put up, what the application is all about.
John, how do you feel about this?
Shouldn't we be discussing this on item number 6?
We can.
I
Yeah,
mean,
we
that's
can.
really, that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. We're done actually with committee member comments, right? Okay, so we can move on. Let's go to minutes of March 15 meeting. Entertain a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, so moved and second. Any discussion about the minutes of March the 15th? You all have a copy?
All those in favor?
You gonna make a vote?
No discussion? All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. John, you're up for the changes we've already submitted.
Okay, thank you. As I've done in the past, changes since the committee discussed to be added are in yellow here. The other stuff is continuation, all the changes the committee has agreed to date. Again, I reached out to Tyler, I don't know if you got my email.
Yeah, and I have our rough draft of what we're gonna be inserting in those pieces, and we'll discuss that tonight, and then once we all approve it and everything, we can
All right,
keep
thank you.
those and put them into the ordinance.
That was my note, the yellow on the first page. On page 2, there was discussion about for participating landowners to have that information in their deeds or something similar. So under the submission requirements, item 19 would be added, legal description of public deed language for each participating landowner's parcel or parcels that specifies which restrictions, setback, sound, and shadow flicker are to be waived, should be waived by the landowner. And again, later on a definition, it indicates that the only thing that the landowner could agree to waive on is setback, sound, and shadow flicker. They couldn't agree to waive erosion control or things like that. So really, I don't have a lot of changes. On page 4, Dennis had suggested down at the bottom of the page. Oh, no, I'm ahead of myself. I've added the information, the description and location of continuous noise monitoring systems that shall include the latest technology on sensors. That was a request, can't remember, it was you from Jess, or whoever, that we should have ongoing noise monitoring systems at the property line. So under the submissions, this is under the noise section, that the applicant would describe where those were going to be set up and how they'd be operated. Did some research on these systems and found out generally they work. They're not as good and not as accurate going out and doing the actual thing. You have, you set up your microphones and everything else, but they can do that. Just a small change on 4. These aren't real regulations. It's this section. On page 5, added not only the applicant but the participating landowner in relationship to determining the sound levels. Now we can thumb through in several pages. There's my yellow one now, on page 12. Tower lighting, starts right out, radar activated obstruction lighting systems shall be used on all towers. And then I added all lighting towers to conform with FAA standards. Dennis suggested moving that forward, so it's right out there. Then a new section, again, this is related to the waivers. Prior to granting of any final approval, the applicant shall provide mitigation waivers. Again, this is, in the application process, you have to submit what those are, but when prior to any final approval, that the applicant will provide the mitigation waivers and specify which provisions are being waived. Again, limit it to those ones identified by the participating property owners, and shall provide a legal description of the property subject to the waiver and shall be recorded in the Oxford County Registry of Deeds. So again, prior to the planning board giving final approval of any project under these standards, that those deeds would have to be recorded and show approved in the Registry of Deeds. And I think there was one change, defined mitigation waiver, which I just used. Legal enforceable written agreement between the applicant and the participating landowner, for which the landowner waives certain protections afforded by this ordinance. And these waivers can be granted only for setback, sound, and/or shadow flicker. So I believe those were the changes that were discussed and asked to go to make changes after the last meeting.
Any discussion?
Only that the number 7 is part of this too.
Which?
Number 7, which was, we talked about the decommissioning, and we had originally said that it was every 2 years, and then we moved it to every 5 years, and I think I brought up at the last meeting that we needed to put it back to 2 years, just because I think the cost of decommissioning could change very rapidly, given, just given like everything that goes on in the like, like decommissioning and the cost of everything. So I would like to just say that we put it back to review it every 2 years. I don't think it's asking like a whole lot. I think it's, instead of every 5 years, I would like to have it be every 2 years. And I would put that on the table as, I would propose that we change it to every 2 years as opposed to every 5 years for the decommissioning like review cost.
Would you like to make that as a motion?
I just did.
Okay. Is there a second? Any discussion? Anybody have a problem with moving the time back to 2 years instead of every 5 years? Hearing none, all in favor of going to 2 years versus 5 years? Okay.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes.
Thank you.
So that's another little thing that you can throw in there, John, please.
Was the committee gonna take any formal action on the changes that we have just covered?
Oh, we should.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the changes as stated. Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Okay. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we'll get to 6, which is a property value guarantee. And a response from the town attorney. Anybody want to discuss the response from the town attorney?
Well, I would just say that, as I talked about earlier, I think that in reading what he said, that try and put something like this into the ordinance might get us into sticky wickets or something like that. And I would like to take the property value guarantee and somehow put it into the permitting process. I mean, if someone's going to like ask to like, put in wind farms or something, then part of the permitting process should be that, okay, you wanna come and put wind farm in here, then, okay, let's look at like what the values are of all of the properties that are within a certain parameter of, and I think our ordinance will state that it's within, 1 mile per 100 foot towers. So if it's a 250 foot tower, then it's 2.5 miles. And then you would have to like value those properties at that time before anything comes in, and then establish something that should happen then. I don't think we want to get into trying to define anything within the ordinance, because I think we could just shoot ourselves in the foot, if you will. That's where I stand. And Tyler, do you have?
Yeah, I just have a couple comments on that. So, excuse me, I of course, the only night that I don't have the Montville ordinance with me, I actually clean my binder out so I can carry it. I'm not familiar with theirs as much. I mean, I did go through that, but I'm not familiar with theirs or how they put theirs together. But from what I see, if we're going to do something with a property value guarantee of any kind, we need to establish the perimeter's affected area, market value versus property tax value. I don't know how you would decide who's the assessor, who is the appraiser, however you would do that. And then obviously the agreement between a company and landowner. Is there an option for like a buyout from the wind company? Is that something that they may do? I don't know how you set that up. I think that this is a part of the ordinance that could probably potentially, yes, take care of one issue, but could open up a dozen other ones legally. And I don't know where that legality falls. I'm not a lawyer, and I think it's a really tough one if we're going to entertain it without the scientific backing. I mean, there's evidence out there of diminished values or diminished market size and things like that, but I think it's a really tough one to place in the ordinance in terms of wording and how you would actually do it without making it muddy, as you stated earlier.
That was why I was looking at it from a different perspective, and that was to leave it between the company and the landowner. And then let that play out. Because then, if you talk about the legal issues, it's specific to the legal issues for that landowner and what they've done to the property, what the market has done, what all the other different parameters and things have happened since the wind towers have gone into place and since they decided to sell and all that other stuff. It's a property-specific situation, and it should be handled in that manner. And the ordinance shouldn't be involved in it at all. The ordinance says this is the property value now. It requires it because it's part of the permit application, just like the sound is part of the permit application. And now, the property owner wants to sell or whatever else, and he has a dispute. And Mr. Milano's comment about the legality and all the fighting and it would be, instead of a class action, it would be an individual pitted against the company about a real estate situation. And all of the nuances of that application or that situation would be handled, but we wouldn't have to get into it in the wording and all the other stuff that, like you're saying, Tyler, you'd have to, you'd need a battery of lawyers. You wouldn't need just one lawyer, you need a battery of lawyers to write that thing. But if we just require it.
Wouldn't that really put the single landowner at a distinct disadvantage?
Well, you could write into it that the legal fees had to be borne by the, if there were legal fees, that would be borne by the company. I mean,
And
these
if
are the
they
kinds of
lose-
things we'd have to discuss. You know what I'm saying? And you're right, and you're also right in the fact that how do you handle that aspect of it? And it could be a
Seems
fund.
like we're just shedding our responsibility to set up a set of rules that everyone can go by, that everyone will be bound by, rather than just say, okay, it's you against them, and you're on your own, good luck.
Well, in a sense, you say that, but if you provide for legal expenses, you have that in your favor. And plus, if you look at some of the property owners, they may not be able to afford an attorney, period. So you really need to have some language in there for that, where they could go to the town and say to the town, I need assistance on some legal expenses. But looking at the legal side, there could be an escrow account for legal expenses in the event that they are needed. Now, as we have heard, the situation or the position of the wind industry, there are no property value problems. So if there are no property value problems, this shouldn't be an issue. It should be moved, as he said.
Right, that is an intriguing part of it.
But it's a protection, if you will, for the property owner, perceived or otherwise. And it takes us away from having to deal with the legal stuff that we would have to get into with this. It would be pretty murky.
Is there a way to take Becky's suggestion and fold it into the permitting process and the planning board would be responsible for it rather than tucking it into the ordinance? Or is that not?
Speak up, Jesse.
Well,
Yeah, the question was, can we take Becky's suggestion?
Steve, we've got to talk
and-
first, and then you can get the end of the.
I couldn't hear.
And take her suggestion and take some language that requires an assessment of all the properties during the permitting process, and then have the planning board be responsible for the permitting rather than doing that work as part of this ordinance. Is that possible?
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
to-
I mean,
No,
I just
I
don't
wanna-
understand how.
I want to ask you, Dennis, why are you shaking your head?
Because you'd have to apply it to everything. If you're going to apply it, you're not going to be able to apply that standard just to, I don't believe, if you're gonna put it in something, and you're putting it into the site plan application process, if you put it into the site plan application process, then it becomes part of anything that comes before the planning board. not just
Why
the
though,
towers.
why if it's not just involved in the
And
commercial window?
why-
That's right.
isn't that
You can make
okay?
it for the commercial wind towers.
Why isn't that okay?
So if you had, let's say if the local hub, if they needed to come, or any restaurant comes, or any type of business would then have to conform to the same standards and prove and go through the.
But not if it's in, just within the commercial wind facility, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not
it's-
applying for
it's-
wind power.
It's
So
only
that's the
within, it's only within a
So I'm
certain,
hearing two different things. I'm hearing you saying we can't put it into just the wind ordinance, and Tyler, you're saying put it into the wind ordinance. So where are you going?
No, it's not that, I think, we need to put something in the window if we're gonna put it in there, I'm not sure. I feel like if we're gonna put something, it has to be in the window ordinance, it has to be specific to that. I think what we're trying to avoid is taking values from both sides. I'm wondering if there's a way to put a value on each property within whatever parameter we set up, whether it's 2 miles within this, area or whatever we decide, and put a value on each one of those places, and then that's agreed upon between the owner and the.
business.
What's gonna happen?
Okay.
If I'm a.
I'm just trying to. I'm not. I'm
agree
not.
that your property.
I don't know how we put this in there, right?
Or, I'm not gonna do it, and then, because there's no meat if I don't do it. And I have concerns, I'm not an attorney, but I do have concerns, is if it's an issue about, if there's anything in your ordinance about this, you're gonna be pulled into court with the other ones, because it's a requirement. So you're gonna be pulled into this, whatever you do.
Which is why we were
Secondly,
saying not put it in the ordinance.
I don't know how you deal with it. I think you really gotta look at this and listen to your attorney, where he says you're discriminating against a certain type of business. It's only applicable to this one. And the other thing, I don't think people are gonna agree on it. How are you gonna determine the assessment? All of a sudden, my property at home, I'm being assessed, I know, way under what it's worth. They wanna do a reassessment. I'm not really encouraged about a reassessment, because I know my property's twice as much, because I had it appraised, as much as it is. So there's gonna be concern about that, is that, okay, you pay, your value of property now assessed at, let's just say 100,000, and then they go out and assess it at 350,000. Do you change his assessment to that? If this is such good, and you can do it between the applicant, why hasn't the people in Mars Hill and all those other places taken the company to court to reimburse them from the loss of property value? There's people out there that against wind that's got some money, and if they could do that, I'm sure they would. I don't know why not. And I don't think they've been all bought off. So I think there's a whole bunch of issues in here. How long would it take to assess all the properties within 2 miles of the wind farm? And who's gonna determine whether that's it? I guess,
Yeah, I have to echo those sentiments. First of all, you read what the lawyer said, right? And I think, so first and foremost, I do a lot of real estate development. I mean, trying to single out a single use makes no sense. In your example of the local hub, well, we don't like the smell of the pizza that's coming out of there, so therefore, we're gonna assess the property around that. I mean, you could argue that doesn't make sense, because just like the lawyer said, you can't, just because a business is coming in, you can't have these assessments. John, you made a good point, right? We're gonna assess everybody's property, and everybody in this example has an incentive to assess their property really high, so they get the break on this type of an agreement. And so, does everybody wanna start paying more taxes because their assessments are high?
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering that if you take the assessment that the town puts on properties within the distance of a particular place, whether it's the local hub or whether it's like a wind farm or whatever, if you say, okay, well, it doesn't affect that. I mean, I'm not so sure that we don't have sort of a place to say, yeah, here's the value of this place. I mean, we're talking about a company who's willing to like pay every, property owner $185 per $100,000 of their valuation on their property. And so if they're willing to put a number on that, why aren't we willing to put a number on that and then say, and then if all of a sudden you go to sell your property and you can't sell it for that $100,000, not that there's that many there, I mean, what's the difference between what you're trying to say and what we're trying to say? I think there's a place where we really have to like look at this, and if we make it a judgment on if someone's going to like, we want to do something in your community, and then you say, okay, well, if you're going to do something in our community and our property values are going to go down, then what are you doing for that? Because it's a whole big issue. I mean, and it's not simple.
Or not only.
I just want to finish, because it's not simple, it's very difficult, right? And let's say nothing happens, we would have to assess everybody's property every year because there are annual swings of the market, right? No one can predict whether the markets are gonna go up or go down.
Don't we assess everybody's property? We get taxed every year. We get taxed every year, and
Yes,
we get
but you don't
taxed
get
on
assessed
this.
every year, right? And so now you're right in there that you can only sell on after you've had an assessment. I mean, I just think there's a lot, and so I'll echo, Becky, what you were saying though, is that I don't think this is the place for that, right? And so
I agree.
I don't think this is it. Now, we
I don't
talked
think it should
about,
be in the ordinance.
I don't think so. I mean, I agree with the lawyers, I agree with some of the statements that are said here. But there's certainly something about the impact that it will have on people, right? And so you look at the pictures, and you can see from certain, Steve's house, look, he might have all those things. That's a bigger impact, right? And one of the things we talked about is with a host agreement or a benefit agreement to the town, it seems to me that those benefits need to directly correlate or somehow correlate to those with the biggest impact, right? Like someone who has all of those, that view shed or something like that, there should be, a benefit and an impact.
Something
to that.
more? You mean something more than everybody else who's getting $185?
Well, this is
Again,
what
you
tricky
talk-
because it's like, but maybe it
$100,000?
affects the poorest person the most. So maybe the poorest person lives on the lake that has the least, or the closest that has the least view, and the least amount of property is the person that's affected the most. Because what's going to happen is if we have these windmills go in, and people can't sell their homes to get away from them, or cannot sell them for their retirement, or whatever they've been planning for using this property for, it's going to ruin people's lives, essentially. And so you're setting up a situation where you have a corporate company that then we're gonna trust them to relate to these landowners and pay them fairly. And you might have people that are completely desperate that are like, I just can't live here, it's driving me completely bonkers. I'll take basically anything. You want to give me a quarter of what my property's worth? Sure, I'll take that because I got to get out of here. Or you have people that can't sell their homes and can't pay for their life for the last 20 years of their life. And this is not a super wealthy community. There are some better off people that have properties on the lake, but maybe like they need that money. And so this is a really difficult issue that I just don't, I'm not sure that we can put it in the ordinance, but I'm not sure that we can't say something that makes sense. And so I don't understand exactly technically why it can't be included in the permitting process. Like why is that difficult? If they have to check sound, why can't they check property values? Why can't they
Well, one of
check
the things we
how
could
often do
do-
we assess property in the town? 5 years?
One of the things we could do, everybody, is we could limit it to anybody who wants to participate. And now, what we're talking about is if you live within a distance of the perimeter of the applicant's commercial wind facility application, then you have an option. You can buy into the plan and say, we want to participate in this plan, and so we would like our property appraised, et cetera, et cetera. You can do it that way. because you will have in that perimeter, that geographic space, some people who are not gonna expect a problem or anticipate a problem, they don't think there's a problem. And I'm not gonna move anyway, so I don't have a problem. And they're out, they don't participate in the plan. And all we do as an ordinance is we, or change to our existing ordinance, recommend that we put in a requirement that happens, the commercial wind facility operator who is applying says, we're developing a plan with the town, and this is the plan. That's where we stop. And then the plan takes over and it does its thing, and then if you have legal issues, then it's between the property owner and then have funding set up to handle the legal aspects of it.
And it goes to the planning board, is that where it goes?
The planning board ultimately gets involved, but it's part of a permitting process. The planning board has a bunch of checks they have to go through on, did this happen? Do we have a plan for real estate? And is it acceptable? And as everybody quoted, is going to be involved, everybody who's going to be affected, have they signed off? And it's no different than any other aspect of your permitting application.
But if you don't have any parameters, you've got nothing the planning board can go by. That's so
The
broad there, you got.
Parameter, well, it's broad because it's meant to be broad in the fact that the landowner and the commercial wind company are the ones that are to develop that plan and decide on it and agree to it. That's the aspect.
What if they don't agree to it?
Well, that's another thing. I mean, if they don't agree
Right, I
with
mean, I think
it,
that's where you get into, I mean, right, this is property, right? I think it's worth X, you think it's worth A, and we can't even get close to the middle on that, and so.
that happens, I think, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, that happens when there's a sale.
Well, isn't that what we're talking about?
No, we're talking about requiring the baseline. That, what you're talking about is when somebody decides that they want to sell.
Well, it's
Okay, and
value,
then,
it's
and now,
value, right?
now, that's the real legal morass that you deal with in this world today, is that the property owner wants to sell. And Steve wants to sell, and all this comes into play.
Steve wants to stay.
But my point is, for discussion purposes,
That's a good joke.
a person like Steve wants to sell. And now we're in the weeds.
But let's follow the argument out. Let's say, Larry, you wanna sell your property,
Yep.
right? And you think that this has devalued your property.
Correct.
So you're saying that your property is worth more. As the wind owner, they're saying it's worth less.
Or the same as what was before, so there's no change.
Well, and that's, when we come to that agreement, that's the easy one, right? Or if you say it's worth less and the wind guy says it's worth more, then that's another, it's even easier. But when you think it's worth more and they think it's worth less, then you know, how do you figure
Now,
that out?
and now you have the landowner and the wind guy.
Yep.
You might have some legal expenses. There is a fund that you can draw on to pay for those legal expenses. If you are one of these folks that don't have the money to provide for legal expenses, et cetera. But it's between the landowner and the
Right,
the wind facility
unless
person.
you put some sort of parameters around it, then they'll never.
But those are the parameters that end up being the variable. You can't write the future.
Larry,
That's
can
what
I
you're
offer
trying to
some-
do here, is write the future.
Can I offer some
No,
proposals?
no, not now. Anyway, we can't go ahead and predict. We're an ordinance review committee. And all we're doing is saying, suggesting, we're not doing anything.
John,
We're suggesting that we put in some protection for landowners where it might be necessary. We don't know that it is going to be necessary, because that's being able to predict the future.
John, you
Yes.
had a comment that you wanted to make, you had your hand up.
Oh,
I'd
I
like to
did.
hear it.
Just a couple questions that you want to think about, as I think about this, if I was putting this together. Is that request to do that as a property owner, is that just a one-time thing during the application phase of the project?
Part of your project, right? Things change.
Right, but I'm just saying, okay, do that in, I don't know, I can't remember Montville, ordinance unfortunately, but again, I don't wanna say much more other than, I'm glad, I'm not gonna accept the offer to write this, how's that? I think it should be something legal counsel does for you. I just see it a real mess, and I see it as anything in that says this is required by the town, even its submission requirements, you're gonna be pulled into court when that comes about. And I would check to see if there's any case law in the state of Maine about successful suits in the law court in relationship to property owners challenging devaluation of property to the Maine Supreme Court.
But we also have to do one thing, John, after we finish.
Yes.
Is give it to the select board, and they give it to the attorney. So if he gets in on this thing and he says, and he slashes and hacks it up, I mean, that's,
Well, why don't we resolve?
so
I
we
think you
could,
wanna
we might be
resolve
able
it.
to do it by having him involved with.
I think you resolve it now, so when you, pass it on to the
But what?
selectmen.
We bring him in now
Right.
and discuss it with him.
I think if I was a citizen of the town of Greenwood, when I go to, I can't think about this right this second.
It's a thorny issue.
It is, I'm just thinking about how it relates to other
And
problems.
we got a real estate guy sitting next to
No,
us.
I think you're very right, John, in the fact that this has been brought up as property valuation, and it's also been brought up as, there's another thing that's been brought up as like health things and all of this. And I cannot think, except that if we try to write something and make it like, our ordinance or this or the other, that we're not just gonna be so muddied up that, number one, we won't ever get an ordinance passed, and nobody will be even able to understand it. And that's just what I think, because it's just too complicated.
Right. I think the one that, you've already said that if you adopt this ordinance, it's acceptable if I have a 25 dBA sound level limit at non-participating property boundaries. And I have this certain amount of infrastructure sound at this property boundary. And I don't have this impact, or won't have this impact at property boundaries. The applicant's gonna go out, as you said, pay people to be participating landowners. The one area that is the difficult one is these things here. I mean, that's really what you're dealing with, I think, is, you've said if I get 25 dBA at property value, property line, that's fine. It meets the ordinance, whatever. We haven't got that technical information for the view areas, because we can't really put our hands around it. We don't know, Steve, is it? What the value of, when he looks out at the mountains here, of that. Would be to me too. So I think that's the one that really comes into play.
It's a subjective.
Right, and boy, Rob's a real estate person, I only dabble in a little bit, but that's a real tough one, I would guess. So I think you need to focus more on, and maybe that's what you're doing, is those ones that we can't go out and take an instrument and say, this is 25. What the tough one is saying.
But I think we've taken another step too at setting a height limit and a distance from that and 100, and I think that that takes a big step in trying to make sure that we're not going to like end up with these other things that are going to happen. Because we've tried to put this into our ordinance as limiting the height and limiting the distance. And before this whole proposal, you know, this whole sort of like idea of somebody else coming in here, they said like, you know, you don't have anything, right? Well, yeah, maybe they will change and they'll get 250-foot towers, that'll be good, but right now, it's not looking that way.
But I
If
think-
we do this, I think we've done our job, and if we can get people to understand what we've done and understand why we've done it, I don't think the medical thing, or the property value thing is going to like have an impact.
Yeah, I can agree with that, just because we looked at health effects, we consulted with engineers, they gave us these parameters that they thought would be healthy. We honored that, and if that's what the ordinance has, then these other things hopefully will not even be on the table, as much as like it'd be nice to fold them in.
I would think in today's world, if someone wanted to do a commercial wind energy facility in Greenwood, and you adopt your ordinance as it's currently drafted, the first thing they're gonna do is take you to court on 250 feet. And then the court can determine whether that stands up or not. And I really, think that, because that, they're gonna say, that limitation, that's why you could have good justification, but this is discriminating against a certain interstate commerce provision which is protected by the US Constitution and all this stuff, and we can't do it 250 feet. So
That's really too bad.
I know, that's what I'm
It's really
saying.
too bad, you know?
I
I'm
think
sorry.
I think that would be the,
We don't want them here, we're making our ordinance the way it is.
Right. I was just using that example of the challenge wouldn't
Sorry.
be before the property values, I think it would be the height of the tower. Because if they can't have the height of the tower, they're not gonna worry about the property values.
Right. So consensus is that we probably should not write anything into the ordinance with respect to property value.
I object to you voting to it before hearing from the public.
End of the meeting, please.
Okay.
Um,
But before the
Well,
vote.
I think we just discussed this and said that it's like getting us into muddy waters if we try to write it in. I think we say in the permitting process, it's something that needs to be done in the permitting process. It's not in the ordinance, but it can be in the permitting process.
But we'd have to put that in the ordinance to make it part of the permitting process.
You could just simply, if you want to have that information, just say, as part of the submission requirements, that the applicant will provide the assessed values of all, property owners with 1 mile of each one, goes to town report and get them out, and you have any information. I don't know what you do with it after.
It's called kick the can, but just say that they have to develop a plan and
Right,
And I
walk
think
away.
that-
But
I
that's
think
crazy
that's
too,
okay.
because that will be just another nightmare.
I have a question. Does anyone know if Montville had a
Legal rep.
proposal from a wind company on the table when this ordinance was written, or did they have a lawsuit from anyone?
No idea.
Okay.
Anybody have any idea? Do you?
Anyone from
the-
public? Yeah.
My understanding at the time, Montville was probably the most stringent ordinance in the state. I'm
Right.
not sure what it is anymore, but probably
Right.
not. But they were sort of the, what do you call it, groundbreakers in
Yeah.
those types of ordinances, if I recall.
Did they ever get challenged, do you know?
I have no idea.
But there may not be, the question is
Yeah.
there even a spot to put one in?
Right,
You're not gonna
right.
get, you're not
That's
gonna get
another
challenged
issue.
if there's no spot.
Right. You said you can put your wind towers
Well,
up here.
and if we set a tower limit of 250 feet, then there might not be any spot in Greenwood, so what's the
Right,
point?
for safety
Here we are.
parameters for setbacks, if you're following the engineer's suggestions, then there isn't a spot here for that many towers.
So to put it into the ordinance, we would have to actually probably have the attorney come in and,
No, just use John Maloney's words.
I told you I'm not an attorney, I don't want to
No,
play.
but he said, if we wanna do it, you just say that, whatever you said.
What I said, well, right now you have under submission requirements, I don't know where it is now, location map, lot and map numbers of all the properties involved.
right.
You know, you can just have, for your information, of what those property values are within the radius that you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
1 mile per 100 square,
100 feet of town.
And you're just gonna get a list out of the assessment stuff.
Which we already have,
Which you already have.
at any given time.
Sure.
So they gotta provide an abutters list.
They've got a
Assessment
copy.
value.
Copy.
I mean, does that get us anywhere? I don't know.
Probably not.
I mean, we have that, right? I mean, that's,
It just means they have to jump through one more hoop, thank you.
yep. There's no, I mean, I just, it's not a big hoop and it doesn't really do
No.
much, right? Unless you're gonna do something with it.
Well, it just means that they have to acknowledge the value of people's property before they go in, and then the value after they go in. That's all. It makes them have to like be onerous of that. And I think that that's an okay request of somebody who's trying to come into our community and, you know, encroach on everything that we consider to be like valuable and part of our community.
Sticky.
I have a question, John,
Yes, sir.
about I guess it was your 250-foot comment. The way I understand this is our town has a right to say if we do or don't want the wind industry here, is that correct?
I think it's been my understanding, and I think your, at least town attorney indicated that the towns, municipalities in Maine do not have the authority to outright ban wind power. I may be wrong, but I think that was the opinion from, that's why we're doing this.
That's not what DEP said. DEP said we could like out and out ban it if we want to. They were here, you weren't here at that meeting, but he
I
was
was
here.
here.
And he was
I was
there.
here.
And he said, you can ban it if you want.
Well, yes, you can ban, as I said, you can ban anything, whether it's stand up in court or not, I don't know.
But what we're doing when we say 250 feet or a setback of 2.5 miles, whatever it may be, the way I look at this is that we're giving the townspeople an option. Because it's saying to them, if they don't want the wind industry here, then you have an option of telling the industry you don't want them here. If you want them here, defeat the ordinance. So, I mean, I feel that that's only fair, that they have a choice. If we give them an ordinance that has 600-foot limit on the height of the turbines, and it has a 1 mile setback, and if they don't like that, if they say that that's far too non-restrictive, that it's going to allow the wind turbines to come in, I'm going to defeat that. So when they defeat that, it goes back onto the old ordinance and they've lost their choice anyway. So I see it that we don't have any choice if we want to give the townspeople a say that we have to be restrictive. And there was a couple of other things that have been mentioned tonight too, that I made a couple of notes on it. They were talking about the assessment values, that if the owner, the property owner felt that his property was valued at more than what they say. Well, it's out of his hands now, the way I understood this. Because once 3 assessors come and assess the property, that, the way I read this, is that the property owner and the developer both have to agree to what the assessment said. So I think that that removes the item of, I think my property is worth more than what I'm being offered. I think that takes it right out of the package. Another thing too, is I've read the Montville ordinance a couple of times, and I doubt if this was written by just members of their committee. It looks to me like somebody that had some legal expertise was involved in that. Another thing that was said tonight, if we turn this back over and tell the property owner to go at the wind developer, the property owner's gonna lose. And if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it the right way. If we're sincere about trying to protect the property owners, then we can't give it back to the property owner and say, go fight for yourself. Either we do it or we don't. One other thing too, with Katsiafikas, the attorney, I read what he had to say, and he said that basically that we don't put this type of a restriction as far as property values on any other business. Well, I say to him, you tell us another business that challenges this community the way that these turbines are. But I think that what we're talking about doing with the property value guarantee, I think personally it's wishful thinking. Because once again, that element comes in that we're complicating this to the point that people are gonna go and look at this and say, I don't want any part of that. On the a second way of viewing that is if I'm a property owner and I know that I can't lose any value from my property, maybe I'm gonna support it. Maybe I'm gonna say the wind ordinance, you know, we don't need that. Or whatever, I don't care if the turbines come in, I can't lose.
Right.
And the last thing I've got to say is I just think I think it makes the ordinance very, very complicated. And I don't know as if we need to do that.
Or should do it.
Or should do it.
Thanks, Brad.
Anyone else?
Two things. I don't think anyone's going to be making serious improvements upon their property if the turbine's going right next to their house. That's just a thought. And the second thing is there's been a property that's been for sale on the top of Spruce Mountain by the Woodstock turbines, owner finance, listed now for the whole time, almost 10 years or something. And it's owner finance, it's 50 grand. I kept seeing in the newspaper years ago and being like, why is this for sale still? This is crazy. And I called them up and they wouldn't even sell it to me because they were like, well, what do you want to do? Like, I'm a single mom, I want to build a house and I live right there, it looks great. And they're like, yeah, we can't sell it to you. I had no idea why they said it to me. And then I found out about the Woodstock turbines and I looked where the property was and it was right next to them. That's why they couldn't even, of good faith, sell me this property to live on because they knew that I wouldn't want to live there either. And it's been for sale for 10 years now and it still hasn't sold. So, I mean, there's a huge aspect of this that there could be a lot of places that people want to sell that they're not going to be able to. So, I don't know.
They had a price on it, they said they wouldn't sell it to you?
It was owner financed. I called them up and they were
That's
like,
illegal.
we don't want to sell it to you.
That's illegal. You can't do that.
They were like,
They can decline.
They can pick. They were like, what do you want to do?
I mean, this is outside of the realm of this, but if you have a put up a price on a piece of property and somebody comes who can pay for that,
You
how
can
can you?
decline.
Owner financed, you can decline people. They were just like, they were like, you don't want to live
For what?
here.
You're
You
being
can
honest.
decline,
Yeah,
sorry.
imagine if I bought it. And then found out.
Real estate law is interesting, to say the least. Anyone have a Yes, sir.
I don't wanna muddy this up.
Oh, of course you do.
Oh, yeah, of
I'm gonna
course you
do it
do, don't.
Okay,
Head right on in.
okay, I go to sell my property and its value is knocked down, you know, is reduced from what I think it is.
Okay.
Can I submit a public complaint under the public complaint, required complaint section of the ordinance?
Sure, what do they do with the complaint?
Well, it says.
I mean, well,
You can always do that,
you,
right, John?
Huh?
You can always do that.
Right, it's supposed to notify, you can have a scheduled meeting between the applicant and you
Sure.
and try to
Yeah.
resolve stuff. I don't know, I'm just trying to say, oh, they make a provision in here that can satisfy that. I'm not sure it would, but.
Right. You have that option, you got court, you got, I mean, there are many other legal aspects.
And then you
all
have
this.
to have somebody else who's quantified what the value of it was when you wanted to sell it and now what it is and all of that stuff, so.
I think that's what eminent domain came about for. If you couldn't agree, you know, for public, at least this is public stuff, that what the price is, and the public can take it by eminent domain, even though they can't agree on what the price should be.
Your suggestion is not getting involved with this?
I saw what the lawyer said. I mean, I think you're opening up a very
Can of worms.
difficult can of worms, and I think Brad hit the nail on the head too. You complicate this thing and make it so people don't understand what that intent is of that, and I look at that and you're starting to restrict what the value of the property. I think it's a bad idea to try to incorporate it here, and I would recommend if we want, I mean, if you would kick it over to the selectmen and tie that somehow to the host agreement or something.
And to say, at least that the attorney would look at it and say, are you kidding me?
The attorney's already said
Basically.
that this is,
You would try to, I'm sorry, Rob, you would try to turn that over to the host agreement with the, about the property values with the person,
maybe,
with the
Right,
company?
maybe you let the selectmen take a look at it. I mean, there is a host agreement they're gonna do with the town, right? And so you try to put in the most impacted areas, maybe you dedicate resources to that area to improve it. Maybe it's in something something for the lake, something for the view shed, something, you know, I mean, again, those are the high impact areas should have, try to increase the benefit through the host agreement. It's just a
Even
thought.
if they're gonna like lose value on where they live.
That's my whole, that's the reason why I say that, right? So if, and I'm not saying it's gonna lose value or not, but if it is, if that's the assumption, then wouldn't you want more resources to that impacted area so that it doesn't lose as much or perhaps creates more value? And again, that goes into what is valuable, right? And people are gonna say.
Quality of life, health, all those things, yeah, sort of play into that too, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but when it.
So it's just, it's a dollar trail. I mean, cause we talk about improving the, you know, the impacts that these things have. I mean, Steve can't do anything really to improve, I mean, unless he soundproofs his house, if there was something like that, you know what I mean? That's, you know, again, so
Still doesn't block it.
Right, exactly. So you can't put a wall up. And, yeah, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't
Doesn't
work.
block in for sound.
Yeah, that's a tough call.
Again, yeah, I mean, I'm not, it isn't easy. I mean, I don't have a formula for it, and I can't come up with a way of even saying it, but I do, you know.
Right.
I see impacted areas that are more impacted than others.
And we have already had experience in this town with the voters with complicated, because we presented land use to support the comprehensive plan, and Ronnie remembers this, and so does Kenny. Overwhelmingly defeated, and it was mostly because they didn't understand what it was, and it was a very complicated bunch of rules.
That's our job as this committee, is to present it to the voters and put it out there and at the public hearing and in letters and everything to make everybody understand what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to protect you, your property values, and your health and welfare. And that's our job, and that's why we were selected to this committee, and that's what we're trying to do. And if we don't do that, then we haven't done our job.
And doing it in a way that is understandable is the key.
Kim, do you know how many people came to the meeting when we decided to form the ordinance and we had that town hall meeting?
Over.
In the big room, in the big building, and everyone came and made this list of things we're supposed to work on. Like a couple hundred people or something?
It was like 180.
Alright,
We had 60 for the moratorium.
right. Pretty good turnout. That means there's about 180, 200 people that showed up that wanted us to do this, you know? So,
Do you wanna make a motion, Brad?
Let me just
Go ahead.
interject, does anyone have any language that thinks it should go into the ordinance? I mean, and we talked about it, there's, well, I mean,
We're not attorneys, so I think it would be a very difficult thing. I don't know if anybody does. Does anybody have any language that might work? Montville's has its issues. It could complicate things. Yes, ma'am.
At the, without like making our lives more complicated, I think that it would be really good to sort of put something in there that says that we need to like understand that this is complicated and should be a part of the permitting process to make sure that there is an established land value for places that might be impacted by a wind in the permitting process.
But without parameters, that might be too broad. Is
I
part
don't
of the
think,
issue.
I think if we try to get into parameters and stuff, we're just like digging ourselves into the mud. We just need to say, here it is. If someone comes up and they want to they want to ask for a permit to put this up, let the people who live around there say, yeah, we want to know what's going on here and what's the process, and let's figure it out. Is that too broad?
Well, I think those people would come to the public hearing and provide that and ask that, and the planning board would consider those things as part of their review process, I would think.
Yeah, I would
And
think
plus,
so.
I would guess there's gonna be stuff going on behind the scenes too.
Oh, you think?
I, for one, have heard a lot tonight, and I just soon give it a couple of weeks more to think about it myself.
That's a good idea.
Anyone else want to make a motion that we table and put it on the agenda for our next meeting?
So moved.
And hope that we can get, some direction or whatever else. I'm not so sure we can, but whatever.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion about tabling this until our next meeting? All in favor?
Okay.
Okay, table it till our next meeting. All right, let's go on. You guys are up. Subcommittee report.
Kim, thank you for making me a whole bunch of copies. We decided that we would keep this simple. We pulled out the pieces of the ordinance that we decided to change and chose the largest ones, which were decommissioning, complaint procedures, control of noise, setback standards, and turbine height. There's a small intro, it gives an idea of what Greenwood is like, characteristics, people that are in this town, the type of taxpayers we have, all of that. At the bottom of this stuff, there's a section that says references. We decided at our last meeting, which these are still on here, sorry, that we're gonna nix the reference part of it and put together a bibliography of everything that we've gotten. Because it's really hard to put into, a page or so about these sections with all of the facts and information and everything we're provided. And I feel like if we chose something specific and pulled it out and put it into that fact and finding, then we'd be leaving out a whole lot of other information that we went through. Kim's got all the binders with every research paper that we've been sent, letter, everything you name it. And before everything is completed, we'll put together like a set of bibliography that'll have listed the titles, submissions, everything, and where all this information came from. Like I said, these are just rough drafts. Any edits, anything you want to add, change, discuss, please feel free.
So when is this gonna be a final document?
When everybody here on the board thinks it looks good. Just the bibliography is the only thing we don't have put together, which is probably going to take some time
I
as well.
think we will vote on it
Yeah.
after changes as appropriate are suggested or made.
So you're getting rid of the references completely?
Yeah, the reference part, like I said, because then we're just going to tag together a bibliography, give a Vicky's getting, quick section breakdown of what everything corresponds to. Because again, a lot of the stuff we found too, and a lot of the information overlaps each other, and that's kind of what I discussed in part, like the setback, and we'll be discussing the setback and turbine height. And like I said, I don't want to overcomplicate this, and that's kind of where we just have to go with the generic written piece.
So we're gonna look this over
Excuse me.
and add comments or whatever at the next meeting?
Yeah, if you want, that's fine, that's works for me. And anything in between that, feel free to email before that as well, and make changes to this. I don't know if you guys, either of you have anything to add to that?
No, I added mine and, did you read it?
Yeah, just pieces.
Okay.
I'm terrible at it.
I just think that, it's, what we've done is we've just tried to like sort of, put down, what we basically felt like happened in the decision-making process. And even though we reviewed all these things, to list every single one of them on every one of these, things seemed like to be overwhelming, so I thought we would just list everything as sort of our bibliography, to support it, and, we can put it at, we can put it in a list of height, and we can put all the things we did. And some of the things are gonna be duplicative because we've used a lot of different things to, evaluate, all of the choices and the things that we changed. So, that's what I think. And I think it was a good exercise.
What are the wishes of the committee? Do we want to have a motion to table this until our next meeting?
Did you want to look over it, Dennis?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's read it and make some notes and then we can look at it again.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, we'll discuss this after review and vote on accepting with changes as we agreed to.
And could I ask, Kim, could you have the list of all of the references that we did, that we used to make these decisions?
That's what we're gonna put together.
And yeah, also it's very good, thank you so much. Thank you.
And a thank you to the committee. They did an awful lot of work here and we appreciate the effort. Okay.
Well, no.
Yeah. Okay, citizens, you're up now, and we have 3, 4. Okay, 2.5 minutes each. I think you were first because you were, well, you were trying to get in early, see, so that's why I put you first.
Alright,
Could you stand up, please?
Sure, I made a couple of notes, so they might not really work together. First of all, it's a wind ordinance committee meeting, so if you say that applies to everything else, if this is a wind ordinance committee, It should only apply to that. It shouldn't apply to if somebody wants to have pizza that smells bad or whatever. It's just one thing. But I was in relocation for, I forget, 10, 15 years, whatever. And we had companies that were in Chicago that had to sell somebody's house in Tennessee. They had no idea what that property was worth. They take 3 real estate agents, they come in, they get 3 different values, they agree on the middle price. That's the end of the story. So you have it done at the beginning, before these wind turbines are in. And I agree with you, Larry, if you want to participate, have the property value then. And then the next time you do it is when they want to sell the property. You don't have to do it every 2 years, every 5 years. You get an independent person that puts the value on there. The landowner, yeah, has his opinion, the company has their opinion, but no, this is a real estate professional. Jesse said, we've heard from experts on sound and everything else. Why haven't we had a real estate expert come in here? Why haven't we had someone talk to us about assessed values, talk to us about international values? There are people out there that do this on a day-to-day basis. I was one of them for a long time. Escrow fees, Larry, for legal, I think, brilliant. There has to be a fund for people that cannot afford to legally address these concerns with a huge company. I think you have to have a fund there for people that can't afford to hire a lawyer. The permitting process, I think, is a little bit too late. I think you have to have it in this ordinance. I think that's your job. The law, you're writing a law. The law is complicated. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to muddy this up. I don't want it to be, that's law. Law is very complicated. That's your job as a committee to do that. And then, so those are my general comments about the discussion today. And then I had a question regarding this on page 2, whatever we're looking at here, the commercial wind and facilities.
John's thing?
Yeah, so
Okay.
if my neighbor wants to waive a setback, so I'm in a butt. So if this guy wants to waive a setback, does that affect me? I just need a further explanation on that. And I think that's all I have to ask.
It would affect you if it may, well, what if that person does that waive that becomes participating landowner? Meaning that landowner accepts the impact of anything he or she may waive, whether it's noise, whether it's shadow flicker.
So if you live next to me and you waive shadow flicker, then it's just my bad that my neighbor waived it?
Right, the standard would still have to be met on your property if you did not waive.
All right.
If you were still within the if you were outside the 2.5 mile, if the person is like next to you, but you're still outside of that, it wouldn't affect you. You still are like, you're outside the.
I'm not following you.
If your neighbor waives whatever it is, a flicker, whatever, it doesn't mean that you also waive it. So if you're still within the point where it says, let's say it's a 200-foot tower and it has to be 2 miles, if you're still within that 2 miles and it would affect you,
Okay.
they have to get you to be a participating landowner as well. Otherwise it's still null and void even though your neighbor said, sure, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So, but let's say that neighbor was on the edge of that 2 miles and you were just over that 2 miles, then that standard doesn't apply to your property anyways. So it wouldn't matter if they waived it. That would allow it. That's kind of the downside of being like on the edge of it.
But I do want to go back to the point is that you guys are wind ordinance committee. It doesn't apply to every other type of business around there. And I think it's your obligation to put something in there regarding everything else.
Can I respond to something that you said a minute ago?
Sure.
You said it's our job to write this whatever. Well, we aren't lawyers either. And it's also not our job to do something that's gonna jeopardize this whole thing by getting sued and go into court and lose it. So far, every single thing that we've done, we've had professional advice on.
Right, so where's the real estate professional?
Well, real estate professional is something different completely than us writing something that a lawyer should be doing. I don't want to be part of it. I'm not qualified.
Thank you, Joe. Was it Steve? No. I don't know who was first. Let's, Marty say.
Well, at one of our meetings, Al Jarvis, the Calpine attorney, said that Maine is a home rule state, and if we didn't want them here, they would go away. I guess it's not as simple as that, but on your point on the ridgeline development that we had that was voted down, it was voted down just because it was so strict and so complicated that people didn't want any part of it. And so I would say that, especially for the property tax issue, don't make it so muddy and difficult that it's gonna turn people off. And they'll just throw the whole thing into the river because they don't like that one. You gotta be careful.
And to that point, when you have something in an ordinance, that if the company that is affected by that one thing decides that one thing is important enough, right to the courts, take the whole ordinance. And John knows of cases like that.
I understand.
I think
Those kinds of things can do
what
that.
you're saying to the people, in the way you've written up the ordinance, is that we are doing this and setting these limits to protect you. And if somebody can come in and meet these requirements, 250 feet and a setback, well fine, come on in. But that's not likely, so let's approve this ordinance and protect the town.
Thank you. Yes, Betsy, and then Mr. Cole, go ahead.
I think you had a wonderful discussion. A couple of people, Brad particularly, changed my mind about some things. My mind doesn't change usually. Excellent that you're gonna continue this discussion. When somebody asked about what's happened with Montville, everybody looked at each other and went, oh. One of the things I'd like to see for the next meeting or whatever is someone to find out what happened with Montville. Has there been any follow-up, any challenge? Also, Bob Morano pointed out that Mr. Katsiapakis, the acting attorney on this, may not be aware of what the character of Greenwood is. And as Kim will back up, he is, Mr. Katsiapakis, if I pronounce his name wrong, sorry, has only been on this for a year. We couldn't use our regular one because he had a conflict of interest. So he doesn't really know much about Greenwood. I think maybe somebody needs to talk with him and say, 72% of our property taxes come from Bob Morano, and do you want to pay them all? Lots of other people like him. We're a little different than other towns. And I think what Becky has been saying, and Jesse has been saying, and Jim St. Germain, is that we've got to protect our citizens, and we can't put an onus of responsibility on an individual citizen to challenge an industry. That's just wrong.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Cole.
If I could, a little history. I worked on the Roxbury Wind Project, and I don't have to go on hearsay or somebody told me this, I heard this from that. I worked up there, and it wasn't a one-time visitors pass where everything was off and quiet. I was fortunate enough to see the craters that they blast into the earth that we filled with concrete and rebar, and to see the shale and the runoff and the pollution and the concrete trucks dumping over the bank and just wash them out here, and the brooks that were not covered with culverts, that were just, the road was bad shale from the blasting. So I can say firsthand that I've seen the devastation that can happen to these mountaintops. Now that being said, In the news lately, there's a lot about fires on these wind turbines. And I'm not speaking for the fire department, I'm not the fire chief, I am on the fire department. And I was at the meeting when Calpine, is there a representative here from Calpine?
No.
No, I've been to the last several meetings and I haven't seen a representative from Calpine. And I'm still wondering why we are, in my opinion, bullied.
His daughter was here last time, Kenny.
Okay, I may have missed it, but it seems like we've been bullied by Calpine. Well, if we do this, they're gonna sue us. If we do that, they might sue us. If they do this, they're gonna sue us. I don't even know why they're not coming to all the meetings like they were in the beginning. But anyways, beside the point.
Hold on, because it's partially Weyerhaeuser who owns the property, and that's Brunswick Timber, so I feel you, I don't want to be bullied either, but
Yeah.
it's not just,
I understand. I was at the fire meeting when they specifically said, if there's a fire, this was to the fire chief and all of us at the meeting, if there's a rescue call, if there's a worker on the tower that has a health issue, if there's any kind of a forest fire, wildfire, generator malfunction, you are to stand down, and I quote unquote, stand down. You are to stay out of the perimeter with your fire trucks, let us handle it. Now, I mean, some of these places where you see they have Presque Isle, that tower that just burnt, isn't in a woodland fire, wildfire area like we're gonna have on top of our mountaintops. Now, after the cutting and the slashing that's been done up there to clear that, I host that there's a lot of fine fuels right on the ground level now. So if something happens there, that is gonna spread fast because that gives the fire something to eat off of. The fine fuels give it a lot of food. And if the fire department is staged away from, it's a rough terrain, it'll be a difficult place to access, I give them that. What's gonna happen to the mountaintop? You can't get a helicopter in there with these things spinning around, pardon my voice, to put the fire out. Not only fire issues, are we talking about oil leakage from these units? Groundwater contamination, aquifers, watersheds, runoffs, that goes right into the brook, it's gonna go right down to my house and right into my pond. I don't wanna have any of that. Is it gonna be controlled? How well? Do they have their own internal fire department, rescue and hazmat teams to control this? I don't think so. They're just gonna let it go. It'll go out eventually. It might be an Irish neighborhood before they get to it, but good luck with that. So I can say I've seen firsthand what happens on these sites. That's pre-construction, before they even get the towers up in the air. And these are the first times that I've seen the pictures that Steve came up with. But I'd like to point out, a lot of poles. My cousin Val is up here just off the end. My cousin Steve is just down here in just the ZAGATA. I look around the room and they're all here. It's just, he's just out of the sight here. And we have Ken Roberts, and now that name will bring up again in a few minutes. I haven't prepared anything, so I hope this is coming out all right. But then we have Ms. Burke, just down here, and myself here, and this little place right here under this guy, and then the towers are just down here, just out of sight. So as you look around the room, there's a lot of people here that this is very important to. Now, I don't understand, and maybe it's a challenge to the board, and thank you for all that you do, because it's thankless work, what you guys are doing. This is very important to us. How do we get somebody from Richardson Hollow, the other side down by North Norway Road in Greenwood, or over on the other side of Sheepskin Bog that says, I won't see those, I don't care, doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me. How do we get those people interested and caring about this? I'm not saying which way they vote, yes or no, but this is important. My neighbors, all of my neighbors, should be affected and care what the other neighbors are gonna have to deal with. And then my last case is I wanna bring up health issues. And down here, Ken Roberts. There's the big code. Ken Roberts, actually he's up here. Just out of sight here of this peninsula. Had an inner ear, and he didn't ask me to represent him here tonight, but I know him well. He had an inner ear cochlea replacement. So he has hearing and balance issues, and he's been told that this could potentially affect him very much so. I myself, in the last couple of months, have had some severe health issues, and I won't get into it specifically, but I'm on a delicate balance with something I'll have for life. I have medications, and supposedly I'm fixed now. Not fixed, like fixed. But I'm fixed. I'm fixed if I take my medication.
We understand that.
If I take my medications, I'm fixed. But the doctors say that anything can create an imbalance and to beware of anything that can happen. So my question would be to the group, if my health becomes affected by this and I can't afford to work anymore, I can't afford to pay my taxes, I'm in fear of losing my house, I can't keep my job, I'm forced to have to move, I'm not gonna have money to take on a health issue that was created by an industry that I'm just one person. And how is the town gonna be able to set up or establish something to help Ken Roberts or myself or anybody else that develops a health issue, if should it happen, and I hope it doesn't happen to anybody, but how can, if I can't even pay my bills and potentially can't keep my house, how am I gonna take on an industry that's forcing me to move?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Who else wanted to speak? Was it Steve? Did you say-
Ken, I would just say that I'm hoping that the way we are developing the ordinance would keep anything from being something that would affect you or anyone else who is in that area.
Yes,
What I'm
ma'am.
working for.
A quick question, how many people in this room can vote? Raise your hand.
Everybody on the committee can.
Yeah, okay.
So we can take a vote now?
Nice try. Yeah. Any other comments?
I just want to, I think you guys are doing a great job. I don't want you to take offense to anything that I've said. I'm on board with you guys, trying to make it a better world for everybody. And I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
I have something to say, I guess as a citizen or whatever, but you can go first, yeah, please.
Well, I just have one quick question. Somebody was saying that the DEP said that you could just say no.
Yes.
Is somebody following up on that?
He said it with a smile.
Calpine said it too. If
He
you
looked
don't
like
want
he
us
was
here, we will
baking.
go away. They said that.
Yeah, he said that.
The advice was that we have less standing in court if challenged by outright banning it than by writing an ordinance that has a reason behind different stipulations.
And that we've actually done research on and
Okay.
can justify what our decisions are.
And we are in better shape than a lot of places that don't have an ordinance.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I think when the town of Greenwood wrote the site plan review ordinance, they were thinking about not only residents, because the purpose of the ordinance says the purpose of this purposes of this ordinance are to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents and taxpayers of the town of Greenwood. So, yeah, they were thinking that.
It's good to hear.
Yeah,
Right, so,
that's 72%.
right.
Thanks.
So I think they recognize the
Entertain a
value
motion.
of the
Thank you,
senior
brother.
residents, yes.
Motion to adjourn? Second?
Yeah.
All in favor? We are adjourned, folks. Thank you very much for coming.